Welcome back to the Oxendine Law Podcast. Your host, Jared Oxendine, co-host, as always, Christine Palmer. And boy, do we have something fun and entertaining for y'all today. Christine, tell our viewers and listeners what they're going to win.
All right. So we have asked on multiple platforms for our listeners, our clients, previous clients, all of our friends and family, tell us what you believe are some myths associated with divorce. Something that you would want to know, is this true? Is it not? Right? If Jared and I were going to host a true episode of Mythbusters, what would you want us to either prove or debunk? And what Jared and I have done have picked 5 that came up very often. They were repeated several times. Spoiler alert, they are all myths. That's the point of the episode, though, is to debunk these myths that we kept seeing come up. These are things that people believe are true, Jared. Like our actual clients, friends, and family believe that these things are either truth or have a very strong version of truth. So we're going to explain to you why these are myths and get them all debunked for you so that you understand that these things aren't common. Right. That's
Well, and these all seem so obvious to us, Christine, but like it's actually a good reminder, right? That these misconceptions really are out there in the public and people actually believe it, which is why we got such a great response to that. So we're excited to do this episode of the podcast, and let's go ahead and share it with you. So first we had a question coming out of Milton. We will keep the name confidential. We don't want to be disclosing people's identities out there, but we had a great question from somebody out in Milton, and it was her belief that mothers always get custody. And you hear that all the time. People just, how many dads have you had that'll come in, they're already resigned, and they're like, I'm not even going to try for this because moms always get custody.
Moms get custody, yes.
Is that a myth?
So that is 100% a myth. Not only, it's a myth in several ways. Number one, dads can get custody. That's just it, period. It is a myth that moms always get custody. There is no presumption over mom or dad, no presumption related to gender or that role. But it also is sort of a myth these days that somebody's only going to have every other weekend, Friday at 6 to Sunday at 6. We don't see the weekend parent as the common anymore. So these are sort of 2 myths in one. First, mothers do not always get custody. Dads have equal chance, and in a lot of cases, a better chance at getting custody. And chances are, in most cases today, you're going to be seeing your kids about half the time, regardless of the situation. We're kind of getting away from that. Moms get all the time, dad sees every other weekend.
And I think I'd be remiss if I don't explain kind of the history on this myth. I mean, it used to be almost true. I mean, back in the day, moms did almost always get custody, but society was so much different back then. I mean,
we're talking
traditionally. I mean, these are 50 plus years ago, right? And this, not being sexist, I'm not being stereotypical, but in most households in America, that was reality. Moms had babies, and they stayed home and they took care of the household, and dads were out working and making the money. And so, of course, when those parties get divorced, mom's always been the primary caretaker. She's been a stay-at-home mom, for goodness sakes.
Right.
And unless there's a problem with mom, some major problem, yes, mom was almost always get custody in those scenarios. Our society, as y'all know, is nothing like that anymore. We have stay-at-home dads. We have, frankly, there's a lot of households, maybe more than 50% now, I think, are dual income households.
Yes.
They both work.
Yes.
They both depend on caregivers to take care of the children, or they swap duties.
Right.
They arrange their schedule where dad has morning hours and mom has evening, or vice versa. So those traditional norms in our society, along with a bunch of other traditional norms, are out the window. And so
that's right.
Absolutely, it is a myth that mothers always
But it is important to note that when it happened, it wasn't based on the fact, like you said, it wasn't just because they're a mom. It was because in our society, that was the role they played, was the parent taking care of the kids. So, yeah, that is an absolute myth that somehow mothers always get custody.
All right. That was a good one. All right. Here's the next one. We're traveling all the way out to Beaufort, Georgia for this one. And this was a submission by a male. And he was adamant that if you are at fault, then you're going to lose everything. I'm guessing this guy must have had a bad experience, or he had a friend that had a bad experience. But that's the question. Is it true that if you're at fault in the divorce, or maybe you've cheated or done something else that you weren't supposed to do, and you got caught, and the other side can prove in court, you're going to lose everything?
Absolute myth. once again. No matter what the reason for the divorce is, judges are going to consider the reason, but that is just a consideration. It's one of the things that they consider in addition to all the laws, all of the other parameters that they have to use when they're making their decisions. So conduct of the parties is one in a list of many, many, many factors that a judge considers.
And even if you're at fault, it's still equitable division.
That's right.
The judges, there's no law that says if you're at fault, then that person that's not at fault automatically gets everything. No, the judge still has to do what's fair. Equitable means according to what's fair. And I will tell you, if this fault thing is not major, and it's not like just obscene and repetitive and ongoing, it hasn't really injured the other party, judge still may do 50-50.
Right.
Even if the judge is they can't believe this party did what they did. They are just thrown off by it. They hate this person. And clearly this person's at fault and they're going to punish them for it. We're still not looking at everything. It's not 100% to zero.
No.
That other party might get a slightly larger share of the estate. Maybe. But we're not talking about 100% to zero. We're not talking 90-10. We're probably not even talking 80-20.
Right.
Maybe 55-45.
Right.
Pushing it when we start getting to 60-40.
Maybe to a 60-40. And I think a big sort of basis behind this myth too is if you're at fault, how many times can you really point to what was the fault in the breakup of a marriage? Let's say that you want to argue that it's because he cheated. Well, he's going to say, well, why do you think I cheated? If we hadn't had sex in 4 years, what did you expect me to do? So then there's fault back to wife. And then wife's going to say, well, you never tell me I'm pretty. It's so that's the other thing about this myth is there is no really fault usually in a divorce. Each party thinks the other's at fault in most cases.
That is very true. Just because you think it's fault doesn't mean that it's legally fault. I like that. That's good. All right. We are traveling to Tucker now, and this is going to be a female submission. So we've done Fulton County. We've done Gwinnett. Now we're traveling down to DeKalb. All right. Good old DeKalb. Had somebody adamant. This person was adamant. Couldn't be reasoned with, no change in their mind. Divorce is always a long, expensive process. You wonder about these folks, right? I mean, did you go through this personally, or is this something your friend was telling you about? Is this something you just read? Like, where's your understanding coming from? But divorce is always a long, expensive process.
Right. Not only can I confirm that as a myth because of my profession, I can confirm that as a myth because of my personal life. That I am divorced, as most people know. You're a divorced attorney. No, my divorce was very quick and easy. My former husband and I are still very good friends. And so I can personally tell you that both from my clients and my own experience, divorce does not have to be a long or an expensive process. If you are reasonable, and I don't mean that you just give up and you say, whatever, if you are reasonable in every regard, chances are your divorce is not going to be long or expensive. Reasonableness is your key to that quick and easy and inexpensive divorce.
That's right. And are there cases that are long and expensive? Sure. And there are cases that legitimately need to be long and expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have a genuine dispute over custody, or we've got some complex assets to divide, or something else to where we need to engage experts and we need a guardian ad litem and we need multiple court appearances and maybe there's problems with discovering assets, right? I mean, those are cases that should theoretically take longer and cost more. But folks, frequently all the time, we have cases that are done less than 30 days.
Yeah. The statutory waiting period in Georgia is 31 days. And I would say I have a large portion of my clients that get it done, shortly over that. A lot of people get it done before that, right? Like we come in what we would consider an uncontested divorce. I think it's important quickly to note that an uncontested divorce simply means that you've reached the full agreement before you file it.
Yeah.
I think that's a common myth as well, that somehow there is an uncontested divorce. You still file the same divorce process and the courts is still the same. But if you guys are reasonable and you know what you want when you come in the door, we can get you done in as little as 31 days.
Right. And that's called an uncontested divorce. If you walk in our door on day one and you already have had discussions with your spouse and you already know what you want to do and how you want to do it, of course, we're still giving you our advice. We can draw up the paperwork, you sign it, we file it, you can divorce 31 days later. Let's say you don't know all the answers and how you want to resolve everything when you first meet with us. Well, that's okay. That's why you're coming to meet with us.
Yeah.
And we will listen to your facts, find out what the assets are, and we'll tell you what we think a fair division should be. And maybe you leave our office and you go speak with your spouse, and maybe they have an attorney, maybe they don't. Doesn't really matter. but y'all work out an agreement after you've met with us. Well, you call us up. Hey, appreciate that first meeting. Guess what? Me and Susie have worked it out. Here's what we want to do. Draw it up for us and get us to sign it. So that is one way to have your case be done quickly and, frankly, for a very reasonable cost. We offer flat fee pricing for uncontested divorces. So if your case is truly uncontested and you've got an agreement on everything, it's not going to be long. It's not going to be expensive. It's going to be a low flat fee. All right, here's one other way you can avoid the long, expensive process. Maybe you have a case that has legitimate disputes, and just for whatever reason, you and your spouse cannot agree on everything. That's okay. That happens all the time. But guess what? If you're both reasonable and level-headed, we can go to mediation, for example, and we can engage the service of a third-party neutral and sit down with that person. Wife gives her side of the story, husband gives his side of the story, and the mediator makes suggestions on different ways, creative ways to maybe reach a compromise in the middle. You compromise, we reach an agreement, we then draw it up, you sign it, and you're done. So lots of cases. I would say, frankly, at least half the cases in our office are not long.
Right.
They're not expensive.
I also want to bust a myth of what is long and what is expensive.
Well, that's true.
Because how many times have you had a client say, this thing has taken 2.5 months. I thought I'd be done by now. Okay, no. When we say long in a divorce, we're talking about a year. That's getting to the long area. A divorce that is contested, which means you didn't reach a settlement before you filed, there's a 6-month discovery period. So do expect that your divorce can take up to 6 months simply by virtues of the laws of the state of Georgia, not anybody dragging it out, not anybody not paying attention or not pushing the case. So when we talk about myths, what is long? 6 months that's a myth. That is not a long divorce.
True.
That is fairly standard, right? And then again, what is expensive? We're also looking at what's at stake. So usually the more you have to fight over, the more expensive your divorce may be. So expensive is also going to be relative. A lot of times we hear people, I can't believe but it's going to cost this much. I'm like, well, have you seen how much is on the table? Like, put it in perspective. You're not willing to pay this much to divide that much, or to make sure that you properly divide that much. So I think what is long and what is expensive are a bit of myths themselves.
That's right. Keep in mind, average contested divorce case takes on average 6 months. Some are shorter, some are longer, and no case, even if it's uncontested, can be done in quicker than 31 days.
That's right.
By law. All right, last one. We got time for one more. We're hitting all the counties. Not all the counties, but a lot of the counties in Metro Atlanta. This is out of Gainesville, so we're going north. We're going to Hall County. And this person was adamant, very adamant in their submission that you don't need an attorney. Some people really think that.
They do.
They've got a simple case. They got it all worked out. They're smarter than everybody else. There's forms online. We can just fill this out. We can sign it. We can submit to the judge, doesn't sign off on it, and we don't have to worry about anything else.
Right.
Myth?
So let me say that legally, you do not have to have an attorney to file and complete a divorce in the state of Georgia. But it is a myth that you should not have an attorney. Just because you say, well, we don't have a whole lot of assets, or we know exactly what we want. Why would we don't need an attorney to tell us what we want. We know what we want. It is about how you navigate through the legal process is what you need the attorney for. It's not to tell you how much money you're going to get, or how much you're willing to pay for the other side, or who's going to get the house. We don't tell you that. You tell us what you want. We help you navigate through the court system to make sure you actually achieve the goals that you are trying to achieve. How often have you seen people come to you looking for post-divorce relief, and they say, no, but you don't understand. This isn't what I meant. This isn't. And I said, well, that's what's on paper. And all that we can do is enforce what's in this order. And had you had an attorney draft this, number one, we would have built in what happens in this scenario. Or number two, we would have avoided it altogether. So it's not about us telling you what you should or shouldn't do. It's about us figuring out the best way to actually accomplish your goals through the legal system in a way that at the end of the divorce, you got what you actually thought you put on paper.
And the protections are in place in the agreement that you need to have. And we talked about this in previous episodes. You agreed to divide assets, and you forget to address the debt that's attached to that asset. Maybe your name's on the debt, but you've built in nothing that requires the other party to refinance or sell the property. For example, let's say it's a house and your name's on the mortgage, and you just said, all right, wife's awarded the house.
And she's responsible for it.
Yeah. And then she doesn't make the payment, and your name's on the mortgage. There's nothing in there that says she's got to refinance it or sell it. If she doesn't refinance, so you're screwed.
That's it.
There's nothing you can do about it. So it's about avoiding costly mistakes, because you're going to call us and you're going to say, oh my gosh, I drew up this paperwork by myself. I've been divorced a year. My wife was awarded the house and she stopped making the mortgage payments. What can I do? And we're going to look at your agreement. And if it doesn't say anything about it, there's nothing you can do.
Right.
And guess what? We can't fix it at that point.
Correct.
So sometimes trying to avoid getting an attorney to cross the T's and dot the I's can end up being more costly than if you paid somebody to do it the right way to begin with.
That's exactly right.
All right, I think we have time for one more. I misspoke. Let's do one more. We've got time. All right, where are we traveling to this time, Christine?
We have one out of Cobb.
Cobb County. All right, around Marietta area. This person said, and this is a good one. I like this one. Only wealthy people need a prenup. The only time a prenuptial agreement is needed is if you're wealthy.
Right.
What do you think about that, Kristen?
So not only is it a myth, that is probably the most common of all the myths that we've gotten today. Everything from, mothers get custody. I mean, I think most reasonable people could say, well, I know that fathers should be able to get custody. They just may not. But I think a big, vast majority of people really believe this, that only wealthy people somehow need a prenup. That is completely a myth. Anyone who has anything, and I'm talking anything, an old beater car that's paid off, to a checking account you opened when you were in college that still has the way to save college information on it, needs or should at least investigate getting a prenup. Because what people don't understand is a prenup, number one, doesn't dictate what you do during your marriage. A prenup is put in a drawer and it never sees the light of day until or unless a divorce happens. It's literally legal insurance. I mean, we keep insurance on our house. We don't expect to go crash our house to burn down, but we keep insurance on our house. So if it does burn down or have a flood, we're covered. We keep insurance on our car. Nobody wants to go crash their vehicle. But in the unlikely event that happens, we're covered. A prenup is legal insurance. It is, I don't expect to be divorced, but in the unlikely event in the future that it happens, I'm covered. I know exactly what's going to happen, and I don't have to go through this nonsense and stress for certain things. Not everything can be covered by a prenup, but for those things, financial things that can be covered by a prenup, you've got your legal insurance in place, so you don't have to have that stress.
I love that analogy. There's a lot of people that don't have anything when they get married, but they don't want to have that financial uncertainty associated with having a divorce without a prenuptial agreement. In other words, the assets that are acquired during the marriage, they want to go ahead and get an agreement with their soon-to-be spouse up front on how they're going to divide those things. In other words, when we do acquire assets, are we dividing everything we earn? Or maybe she gets to keep what she's earned and I get to keep what I've earned. If it's in my name and only in my bank account, I keep it. If it's in her name, only in her bank account, she keeps it. But if we make the joint decision to have a joint bank account, or we buy a house and we put a piece of property in both names, then perhaps we only divide the jointly titled assets. You don't have to have any assets to reach those terms of an agreement along those lines.
That's right. And how many people do you know who didn't have anything? They got married young, or they just hadn't established themselves yet, and they thought, I don't need it. And then they built all that wealth through the marriage, and now it's just a huge fight. And if you'd had some sort of prenuptial agreement in place, remember, a prenuptial agreement is an agreement. Agreement means us two parties came together and agreed. This is not an adversarial venture that we're going into here. This is two parties sitting down. You're agreeing to have a life together. Why can't you agree how we're going to negotiate things if that ends in a bad way someday? Just for your legal insurance.
Right. Business owners are another example. You may have somebody that's just starting a business. It might not be worth anything, but 20 years down the road, that business will be worth something. You can get a prenuptial agreement that addresses how we're going to divide that business in the event of a divorce. So you don't have to get a prenup, no requirement, but it's a myth to say that only wealthy people need it. There's a lot of other people that could benefit from a prenup.
Sure.
Look, this one was fun. I'm glad we did it. And we're going to continue to engage with you guys. Again, we're available on all major social media platforms. We encourage you to submit questions. Please submit your questions, submit your ideas. If you have something that you think would be entertaining, you got a question or a topic of something that's been on your mind that you want an answer to, submit those. We will answer those for free for you on the next episode. So be sure to do that. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We look forward to seeing y'all on the next Oxendine Law podcast episode. Y'all take care. See you soon.